might want to mute everyone while you're talking.
Idea. I should have said that. If everybody's willing to just mute themselves while I talk, and then when I'll explain how the whole thing's going to work. So if you could just quickly mute yourselves, that will help make the internet thing flow a little easier. So just to explain, as I say, I run a theatre company called Elysium Theatre Company, which I founded with Danny Solomon and Hannah Ellis Ryan, both of whom are with us today. This is our third workshop on Shakespeare, and following this, the intention is to go on into Ibsen, Strindberg, Chekhov, and then take requests. So if people are interested in other playwrights, Tennessee Williams, Pinter, Eugene, or whatever, or anything more interactive, like how you do a scene study or anything like that, we can just carry on doing them. And we've enjoyed these so much that we want to make them a key part of what Elysium does. So we're going to be expanding the program, we hope, even after COVID-19 is down. So the way these work is that essentially I'm talking. Everybody is welcome to ask questions whenever they want or make comments. And as we talk about the plays, we're also going to be doing, the format basically is that we will be also seeing scenes and speeches from the Elysium Theatre Company actors. So as I say, if you want to say something, unmute yourself and just ask, or do the kind of flag wave, the hand wave thing, which you can do as a kind of icon, and we can just crack on from there. Any questions anybody wants to bring up right now before I start? Anything anybody wants to ask about the late plays? They're not as well known as the other plays that we've been looking at. Is there anything anybody wants to ask before we even start that you want me to look at during the workshop? Anything you want me to address?
Can I just request that Robin mute, because
Carl, we can't hear. Is everybody muted?
Oh, sorry. There's someone named Robin who is making quite a bit of noise.
Well, Robin is one of our actors. Robin, I think he's still at the moment finding somewhere where he can actually take part. So, are there any questions anybody wants to ask?
Yeah, Jake, could you just establish, so to speak, when the plays were written? Because, and actually maybe just spend 2 minutes on saying when the tragedies were written, and when the late plays were written, because it's actually very interesting in terms of the history.
Well, that's all key in terms of what the late plays actually are. So that's all going to become part of it, because there's a very specific reason why they're called the late plays. And that also equally explains why they have a very unique kind of place in his canon, and why they're a different kind of play to everything he'd written before. Even though they pick up on images and motifs and storylines and themes, definitely, from plays that he'd written before. There's something special about them. So I just need to, so all of that is all very much part of this. So Robin, are you there?
I am.
Right, Robin. Okay, so we start with Robin giving us a speech from the very last play that Shakespeare wrote, The Tempest, which is the last of the late plays. Robin, take it away.
Are you frozen?
I haven't frozen. I'm all right up here. I think you just need to go. Robin? Okay, Robin's frozen. Robin, are you there?
You're frozen, Jake. Sorry.
No, I haven't frozen. You just, can everybody hear me? Yeah, everybody can hear me, Robin, so just go for it. But we can't see you. Robin? Sorry, guys, this is a technical hitch. It often happens. Robin, are you there?
If Robin switches video off, he'll get a better audio signal.
I think he's lost everything. So let me just give him a ring.
Text him and tell him to log out and log in again.
Yeah. Sorry, we had problems like this last time. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh.
Hi, Jake.
Hi, Robin. I think we're all fine. We can't see you or hear you. Are you still in the group?
I know. It froze and then it died.
Can you come back in?
Sorry.
Just come back in.
Okay, I'm trying.
Okay, just hit the thing, and then we can start. That's all good.
Okay.
Perhaps while he's coming back in,
yeah.
You may say more about this later, but I wanted to ask what's the role of music? How and when did music come into the plays? I know the Tempest had music.
Well, there's music in all of the plays. The music in the Tempest and the Lake plays is very, very specific, the way he uses them, because the music is actually used very much in a magical sense, at kind of high moments in the plays when miracles take place. So we will come to that when it's appropriate. Have you got it, Robin?
I have.
Are you in?
I'm in.
All right.
Can you hear me?
No. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, hang on. I'm going to switch off here. All right, off you go, Robin.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, but we can't see you. Robin?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Do you want to take it away? So this is the opening. This is the famous speech from the Tempest.
Right. Okay. You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-topped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherits shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded by a sleep.
Thank you, Robin. So that's a very famous speech from the Tempest. Which I wanted to put at the beginning of this because it embodies the kind of almost mysticism of the late plays. So as Chris was saying, there's a context to all this. By the time Shakespeare wrote the late plays, we were well into the Jacobean period, well into the era of King James. And Shakespeare was not necessarily at the end of his life, but he was coming, it seemed, towards the end of his professional career. And something happens to playwrights, and not just playwrights, but also poets, artists in general, when they do start to come to the end of their lives or their professional life. Their work changes, and they start to almost feel like they need to create a work of art which embodies their final vision. And quite often that final vision is something very challenging, very mysterious. They want to make a general massive statement about existence, life, to summarize the wisdom that they have achieved through their lives. And quite often what you see with these playwrights and novelists, etc., is a completely new stylistic change. So you see it, for instance, in T.S. Eliot when he writes the four quartets. You see it at the last plays of Strindberg, the last plays of Ibsen. You see it in the last novels of people like Charles Dickens or George Eliot, an attempt to kind of summarize something general about the human condition. And as Shakespeare came to the end of his life, he embarked on a whole new journey with his work. He'd written the comedies, he'd written all the tragedies, he'd gone through this massive process in his life where when we looked at the comedies, we saw all that optimism, the warmth, the transformational kind of quality of the laughter, the belief in love. Last week, we looked at the tragedies where he sank deep into the darkness of human behavior, dealing with jealousy and murder and madness. And towards the end of his life, he started to come out of that. And in the last plays, rather than dealing with the snapshot of someone's life, the kind of pivotal moment of Othello, the pivotal moment of Rosalind, he started to want to tell stories which were generational, which spanned parents, children, grandchildren, and show how the wounds of a tragedy, the terrible things that happens in the tragedies, can somehow be healed. And this is what he's doing in the late plays. All of the late plays have things in common. They all are generational. There's always, in one generation, a catastrophe happens, and in the second generation, the catastrophe is somehow healed. And the people who were part of the catastrophe at the beginning are either healed by their children, or they're healed by a wider kind of journey of their entire society, or they go through a process of healing of themselves. No one quite knows what spurred Shakespeare on, triggered Shakespeare to do this, but there are four late plays that are talked about, one of which was only relatively recently decided was, or at least had Shakespeare's work in it. The first was Pericles, the second was Cymbeline, the third was The Winter's Tale, and the fourth was The Tempest, which is widely regarded as his very, very last play. Now, there's no definitive knowledge as to what the absolute order of the plays all came in, but it's widely thought that was the process. Now, when he was writing these plays, a new fashion was coming into theatre, which was called the masque. And up until then, Shakespeare had been writing dramas which are very much character-based, very much drama-based, very much story-based. And what was happening was a new fashion was coming in, which was very inspired by James I and also a man called Inigo Jones, who was an architect, but also was creating these masks. And masks were much more like, they were about spectacle. They were about machinery on stage. They were about spectacular things taking place. And as this was becoming more and more popular, obviously someone said to Shakespeare or his producer, we need to write this because people want to see this. So one of the interesting things that Shakespeare was challenged by was his need to somehow integrate this masque, this massive sudden visual spectacle into his work, which he hadn't really had before. And one of the things that you see in these 4 plays is that at pivotal moments, massive interventions come from the gods or the spirit world or whatever you want to call it, a strange kind of supernatural celebration. So he was co-opting the masque to try and use it, not just as a thing there to get audiences in, but to use it as part of his actual dramatic language. Now, these plays are sometimes called romances. They're not romances in the sense of being romantic, like love stories necessarily, although love does feature in them. They're also not romances in the sense of the romantic poets, but they are these extraordinary kind of fantastical dramas. Now, a lot of people will talk to you about the conventions of romances, and they're full of images of miracles, of supernatural, of wizards, of magic, and strange fairy tale qualities, of lost children, bears and animals in the woods, magicians and wizards. And these are all kind of fantastical stories. But whenever Shakespeare used a convention, he never ever was bound by it. This is a conversation I used to have when I was a student. He was never bound by the convention. He always took the convention and made it serve him. And what he was trying to do with the romances was use images of the romance convention to create metaphors and knots of drama, which meant that he could start to fit into a play this massive generational saga he was trying to tell. So the first of them was Pericles. I'll explain what this all means in a second. I will also just very briefly say that this cycle of plays has a very special place in my life. I'm going to embarrass Rob Wilton now. The very first Shakespeare that I ever directed was the Winchester, which I did at university about 30 years ago, and Rob Wilton played my Leontes there. One of the first Shakespeares I ever studied was the Tempest, and I ended up specialising in the late plays. I became completely immersed in them, and my brother was in a school production of Pericles. So I've seen them all, or I've been in them all, or I've witnessed them. I've seen lots of productions of the Tempest. What's always drawn me to them is the heightened reality of them. They are magical. If you enter into one of the late plays of Shakespeare, you sort of have to believe in magic. You're going to see dead people come to life. You'll see people embrace corpses that they think are their husband. You're going to see fairies. You're going to see Ariel. You're going to see the monster Caliban. You're going to see a statue that suddenly, I think I've already said, that comes to life. They're about miracle. They're heightened. They're almost magic realism. And they're absolutely, of all the plays, the ones that are absolutely plugging into the stories of myths. Now, the big challenge, just to be stressed for a second there, the big challenge about this idea of writing a generational play, how do you do it? How do you put on stage a saga which takes place over 16 to 20 years, which is what all the late plays deal with? And what you see with these 4 late plays is him experimenting with the form, trying to find the way of telling this story so that you can encompass this massive cycle of human existence. And he doesn't always get it right. What's really beautiful about the late plays is you've got someone who mastered comedies, you've got someone who mastered tragedies, you've got someone who mastered history plays, but then he suddenly tries to master an entirely new genre. And you can see him step by step getting closer to the way he wants to tell the story until he gets to the Tempest. So there's a wonderful kind of emergence of a new kind of art going on. And it starts with Pericles, as I say. Now, the thing about Pericles is it's not all written by Shakespeare. We don't know who the other artist is, who the other original playwright was. But what looks like happened is that Shakespeare was brought on to finish it, or it had already been written and he decided to, or he was asked to finish it. So the play moves from what's obviously somebody else's poetry into his. It's not his most successful play, but it still has something remarkable in it. Those of you who don't know it, because it's very rarely done, it's not about the ancient Athenian king Pericles. It's about a Pericles that he creates, the Prince of Tyre. It starts with him wooing the daughter of Antioch. He's supposed to be marrying his daughter, only to discover that she's having an incestuous relationship with her father. He then goes on this extraordinary kind of Odyssean journey where he falls in love with a woman called Thaisa, marries her. She dies in childbirth on a ship during a storm. And the sailors all tell him that he has to throw his wife off the ship because it's bad luck. So he keeps the child, which he calls Marina, and he throws the body of his wife off the ship. Unbeknownst to him, she's not actually dead. But the experience of losing her pretty much destroys him. And the rest of the story is about the destiny of Marina and him, as gradually she's lost to him. She ends up in a brothel. And through the strange sequences of events, eventually they're all reunited at a temple to Diana, and the family is reunited. You have Pericles reunited with his wife and his daughter in a series of revelations and rediscoveries. And through rediscovering them, Pericles himself is almost brought back to life. So you can see as you read or see the play that the themes of the play obviously fascinated him, but he didn't necessarily pull it off as a completely realized piece of theatre, which is why we're not going to look at any of the scenes today. Because there aren't necessarily they're not as memorable as some of the later ones. But the reason why it's fascinating is you can see what must have hooked him and what must have inspired him. And it's full of imagery from myth and fantasy and almost dreams. There's a beautiful image right at the beginning where a suit of armor is drawn from the sea. And a recurring theme all the way through it is the sea, the idea of ships and shipwrecks and of life being a journey in which these random shipwrecks happen to you. The end of the play ends at the Temple of Diana. So there's this whole kind of mythical world going on. And in order to tell this massive story in which Marina goes from being a baby to a teenage woman, he uses the figure of Gower, who was one of the first great English poets, as his narrator. So at the beginning and the end of each act, Gower comes on and recites, tells you what's going on. And it's quite a clumsy device. But it's the first go at trying to create a situation in which you can suddenly move through time and tell this epic story. So that was the first one. And there are some magnificent things in it, some beautiful images, but it's not necessarily his most effective play. Samuel Johnson famously called it a mouldy play, but it's still, interestingly, when you see it, has something very magical about it. It's archetypal, to use a term that Jung would say. It draws on those archetypal images of seas, of gods, of loss, all those different things. And there is a kind of regeneration at the end. And Cymbeline is the first play that he then wrote on his own, which was an attempt to find a metaphor, find a way of writing a story which enabled him to deal with these new redemptive themes. So has anybody actually who's read Cymbeline? Who knows Cymbeline? Do I need to summarize it very briefly? Good, okay, so some of you have. Some of you seen it as well. So one of the interesting things about these last three plays is each one is almost a rewrite of one of his great tragedies. So Cymbeline is almost like a rewrite of King Lear. It also deals with a prehistoric English king, which is King Cymbeline. And it also deals with a king who exiles his own daughter. In this case, he exiles his daughter because she refuses to marry the son of his second wife, Cloten. She's in love with a man called Posthumus Leonatus. Now, the interesting thing about Posthumus Leonatus is that he's a commoner. So he's not actually a royal family member of anywhere. Therefore, for him to marry Imogen, who is his daughter, that would be a terrible violation of the order of things. So she is banished in the same way, a different way that Cordelia is banished, but nonetheless she's banished. Now, the story, the reason why Cymbeline is fascinating is it's a story, it's like a kind of starburst of ideas. It doesn't, when you read it, the first time I read it when I was about 17, I was completely caught up in it. It was like this magical, extraordinary, epic story with all these characters that came and went and revolved in each other's lives, and then eventually all came together at the end. When I read it recently, it didn't seem quite as good as that. But what's extraordinary about the play is that it's got a huge cast. It sprawls across Europe. It's set in Roman times, and one of the political aspects of the whole thing is that Cymbeline is part of the Roman Empire, but through his second wife, the Queen, and Cloten, he decides to go to war with Rome and refuses to be pay its, funnily enough, pay its tribute. It's one of the interesting things about the play is it's weirdly, and it's the greatest anti-Brexit play ever written. In fact, because it's almost exactly parallel. You remember on Brexit there was this whole thing of the £10 billion that we give to the EU. Bizarrely, in this, it's all about giving money to the Roman Empire, but getting the boon of being part of the Roman Empire. And one of the other points is that Cymbeline, the ambassador from Rome, Lucius, is a great friend of Cymbeline. So there's this sense of a king going to war against an enemy that he doesn't necessarily hate. And the patriotic speeches, which weirdly enough all talk about sovereignty and how our sovereignty has been taken away, are given to the king's wife and the queen and her son, who's a kind of idiot. So for some reason, the patriotic voice is associated with villainy in the play and stupidity. So that's the political side of the play. The other side of the play is, it's multifaceted. There are all these different plot lines. As well as Imogen, Cymbeline had two sons, Guiderius and Arviragus, and they were lost when he was a child. We don't know why. We just know that for some reason he had 3 children. He lost 2 of them when they were children, when they were children. Imogen is all that's left. So when Imogen is banished, his entire family has been broken up. All his children have been gone. And the third aspect of the story, and we find Arviragus and Guiderius later, is the love story between Posthumus and Imogen. Now, Posthumus, as I say, is a commoner, and Cymbeline banishes him. And one of the core stories of this of drama is will the marriage between Imogen and Posthumus survive? So in the scene that we're about to listen to, this is the farewell scene between Posthumus and Imogen. Now, Posthumus is a kind of heroic figure, or he's supposed to be. He's set up as heroic. He comes from a noble warrior family, but as I say, they're not royal. So the idea of a commoner marrying the king is unacceptable. The other character in the scene is the queen. Now, the queen doesn't have a name in the play, but all we know about her is that she's very beautiful, and that actually she's scheming against Cymbeline. So at the beginning of the scene, nobody knows this. Imogen and Posthumus think that she is an ally. Off you go.
No, be assured you shall not find me, daughter, after the slander of most stepmothers, evil-eyed unto you. You're my prisoner, but your jailer shall deliver you the keys that lock up your restraint. For you, Posthumus, so soon as I can win the offended king, I will be known your advocate. Marry, yet the fire of rage is in him, and 'twere good you'd leaned unto his sentence with what patience your wisdom may inform you.
Please, your highness, I will from hence today.
You know the peril. I'll fetch a turn about the garden, pitying the pangs of barred affections, though the king hath charged you should not speak together.
O dissembling courtesy! How fine this tyrant can tickle where she wounds. My dearest husband, I something fear my father's wrath, but nothing, always reserved my holy duty, what his rage can do on me. You must be gone, and I shall here abide the hourly shot of angry eyes, not comforted to live, but that there is this jewel in the world that I may see again.
My queen, my mistress. O lady, weep no more, lest I give cause to be suspected of more tenderness than doth become a man. I will remain the loyalist husband that did e'er plight troth. My residence in Rome at one Philario's, who to my father was a friend, to me known but by letter. Thither write, my queen, and with mine eyes I'll drink the words you send, though ink be made of gall.
Be brief, I pray you. If the king come, I shall incur I know not how much of his displeasure. Yet I'll move him to walk this way. I never do him wrong, but he does buy my injuries. To be friends pays dear for my offences.
Should we be taking leave as long a term as yet we have to live, the loathness to depart would grow. Adieu.
Nay, stay a little. Were you but riding forth to air yourself, such parting were too petty. Look here, love, this diamond was my mother's. Take it, heart, but keep it till you woo another wife, when Imogen is dead.
How? How? Another? You gentle gods, give me but this I have, and sear up my embracements from a next with bounds of death. Remain, remain thou here, while sense can keep it on, and, sweetest, fairest, as I my poor self did exchange for you to your so infinite loss, so in our trifles I still win of you. For my sake, wear this. It is a manacle of love. I'll place it upon this fairest prisoner.
Oh, the gods. When shall we see again?
Good, thank you. Very nice. Thanks very much. So the key thing there, the image there, is that they exchange rings. And again, this is an example of, yet again, Shakespeare taking these images from myths and as a kind of ceremony of the exchange of rings, which is a kind of marriage without being a marriage. And the exchange of rings is their pledge for each other, that even though they're going to be separated, they will not betray the other one. And this becomes one of the main stories of the drama, is that while Posthumus is in Rome, he encounters a figure, Iachimo, who is an Italian gentleman. Now, this is another interesting one. If I mentioned that the play is a rewrite of Lear, it also draws in Othello, because Iachimo is the same name as Iago. It's the same thing. Now, Iachimo is the opposite to Posthumus, where Posthumus is loyal and truthful. Iachimo is someone who is a swaggerer. He's a seducer. He's a real Renaissance gentleman. He knows how to run rings around everybody, and he enjoys challenging other people. And he challenges Posthumus. He makes a bet on the virtue of Imogen.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I overreacted. Okay, sorry about that. Maybe we'll talk later. Oh. God, sorry, was that me? Sorry.
Who was that? Hello?
Sorry, I think I might have said something and unmuted myself. I was just sorry about that. I was just talking to someone else, but not noticed I pressed unmute.
Don't worry, we'll just carry on here. That's fine. Don't worry. So Iachimo challenges Danny, challenges Posthumus that if he can seduce Imogen, then they bet for 10,000 gold coins. That if is everybody still there? Are you still? Hello? Hello? Is everybody?
Jake Murray is the host now.
Hi, Jake.
Hey guys. It seems like the old gremlins are out in force tonight. Back on track. So what I was trying to say was that so the challenge that takes place between Iachimo and Posthumus is an attack on the virtue of Imogen. Posthumus is absolutely determined to prove that no one, Imogen will not betray him. Iachimo wants to prove that this is not the case. So this is what Iachimo does. He travels to England and he does try and seduce Imogen, but he fails. But what's fascinating about it is he does manage to get into her room. He hides and steals the ring. He steals the ring and also identifies on her body a birthmark that only a lover could notice. And he comes back with the intention of pretending to Posthumus that he has slept with Imogen. And this is the scene in which Posthumus and Iachimo confront each other. Take it away.
I hope the briefness of your answer made the speediness of your return.
Your lady is one of the fairest that I have looked upon.
And therewith all the best. Or let her beauty look through a casement to allure false hearts and be false with them.
Here are letters for you.
The tenor good, I trust.
'Tis very like.
Nigel, that's you.
Was Caius Lucius in the Britain court when you were there?
He was expected then, but not approached.
All is well yet. Sparkles this stone as it was wont, or is not too dull for your good wearing?
If I had lost it, I should have lost the world of worth of it in gold. I'll make a journey twice as far to enjoy a second night of such sweet shortness, which was mine in Britain, for the ring is one.
The stone's too hard to come by.
Not a whit, your lady being so easy.
Make not, sir, your loss your sport. I hope you know that we must not continue friends.
Good sir, we must, if you keep covenant. Had I not brought this knowledge of my mistress home, I grant we were to question further. But I profess myself the winner of your honour, together with the ring, and not the wronger of her or you, having proceeded but by both your wills.
If you can make apparent that you have tasted her in bed, my hand and ring is yours. If not, the foul opinion you had of her pure honour gains or loses your sword or mine, or masterless leaves both to who shall find them.
So, my circumstance, being so near the truth as I will make them, must first induce you to believe, whose strength I will confirm with oath, which I doubt not you'll give me leave to spare when you shall find you need it not.
Proceed.
First, her bedchamber, where I confess I slept not, but profess had that was well worth watching. It was hung with tapestries of silk and silver, the story proud Cleopatra, when she met her Roman, and Cydnus swelled above the banks, or for the press of boats or pride. A piece of work so bravely done, so rich, that it did strive in workmanship and value, which I wondered could be so rarely and exactly wrought, since the true life of it was.
This is true, and this you might have heard of here, by me, or by some other.
More particulars must justify my knowledge.
So they must, or do your honour injury.
The chimney is south the chamber, and the chimney piece, chaste Diane bathing. Never saw I figures so likely to report themselves. The cutter was as another nature, dumb. Out went her motion and breath left out.
This is a thing which you might from relation likewise reap, being, as it is, much spoke of.
The roof of the chamber, with golden cherubims is fretted. Her andirons, I had forgot them, were two winking cupids of silver, each on 1 foot standing, nicely depending on their brands.
This is her honour. Let it be granted you have seen all this, and praise be given to your remembrance. The description of what is in her chamber, nothing saves the wager you have laid.
Then, if you can, be pale. I beg but leave to air this jewel. See? And now it is up again. It must be married to your diamond. I'll keep them.
Joe. Once more, let me behold it. Is it that which I left with her?
Sir, I thank her that. She stripped it from her arm. I see her yet. Her pretty action did outsell her gift, and yet enriched it too. She gave it me, and said she prized it once.
Maybe she plucked it off to send it me.
She writes so to you, doth she?
Oh, no, no, no. It is true. Here, take this too. It is a basilisk unto mine eye. Kills me to look on't. Let there be no honour where there is beauty, truth where semblance love where there's another man, the vows of women of no more bondage be to where they are made than they are to their virtues, which is nothing. Oh, above measure false.
Have patience, sir, and take your ring again. 'Tis not yet won. It may be probable she lost it, or who knows if one of her women, being corrupted, hath stolen it from her.
Very true. And so, I hope he came by it. Back my ring. Render to me some corporal sign about her more evident than this, for this was stolen.
By Jupiter, I had it from her arm.
Hark you, he swears. By Jupiter, he swears. 'Tis true. Nay, keep the ring. 'Tis true. I am sure she would not lose it. Her attendants are all sworn and honourable. They induced to steal it, and by a stranger? No. He hath enjoyed her. The cognizance of her incontinency is this. She hath bought the name of whore thus dearly. There, take thy hire, and all the fiends of hell divide themselves between you.
Sir, be patient. This is not strong enough to be believed, or one persuaded well, or...
Never talk on't. She hath been colted by him.
If you seek further satisfying, under her breast, where the pressure, lies a mole just proud of that most delicate lodging. By my life, I kissed it, and it gave me present hunger to feed again, though full. You do remember that stain upon her?
Aye, and it doth confirm another stain as big as hell can hold, whether no more but it.
Will you hear more?
Spare your arithmetic. Never count the turns. Once and a million.
I'll be sworn.
No swearing. If you will swear you have not done't, you lie. And I will kill thee if thou dost deny thou hast made me cuckold.
I'll deny nothing.
Oh, that I had her here to tear her limb meal. I will go there and do it in the court before her father. I'll do something.
Quite besides the government of patience. You have won. Let's follow him and pervert the present wrath he hath against himself.
Good, thank you very much. Very nice. Okay, so nice stuff. So as you can see, the point now, as you can see, it's a complete rewrite, or not necessarily a rewrite, but he's kind of re-spinning the Iago-Othello relationship. And what happens there, if you listen to the entire scene, you've got it. That Iachimo knows that he's won. The point about Iachimo is he's failed with the wager, but he doesn't like to lose. So he spins Posthumus all the way down the line until he knows he's got the coup de grace, the final knife, which is the information about the mole that only he could know. And that is what drives Posthumus insane. And Posthumus' reaction is as violent and as misogynistic as you can possibly imagine. Danny, can you give us that speech, the speech straight after?
Yo. Is there no way for men to be, but women must be half workers? We are all bastards, and that most venerable man, which I did call my father, was I know not where when I was stamped. Some coiner with his stools made me a counterfeit. Yet my mother seemed the Diane of that time. So doth my wife the nonpareil of this. Oh, vengeance, vengeance. Me of my lawful pleasure she restrained, and prayed me oft forbearance. did it with a pudency so rosy, the sweet view on't might well have warmed old Saturn, that I thought her as chaste as unsunned snow. Oh, all the devils! This yellow Yakimo in an hour was not, or less, at first. Perchance he spoke not, but like a full acorn boar, a German one, cried, "Oh!" and mounted. Found no opposition, but what he looked for should oppose, and she should from encounter guard. Could I find out the woman's part in me? For there's no motion that tends to vice in man, but I affirm it is the woman's part. Be it lying, note it, the woman's. Flattering, hers. Deceiving, hers. Lust and rank thoughts, hers. Revenges, hers. Ambitions, covetings, change of prides, disdain, nice longing, slanders, mutability, all faults that may be named may, nay, that hell knows, why hers, in part or all, but rather all. For even to vice, they are not constant, but are changing still, one vice, but of a minute old, for one not half so old as that. I'll write against them, detest them, curse them, yet 'tis greater skill in a true hate to pray they have their will. The very devils cannot plague them better.
Good, thank you, Danny. Brilliant stuff. Okay, so once again, as you say, the interesting thing is Shakespeare is returning to this issue of sexual jealousy. We looked at it in Much Ado About Nothing, we looked at it in Othello, and what's always fascinating about it is that whenever this issue comes up, it's always a problem between men. It's never actually an issue that the women have never done anything. It's always the men tearing themselves apart. So this moment where essentially there's this massive rift between Imogen and Posthumus fits in with the absolute beginnings of a rift in the actual kingdom. So Imogen ends up being banished. The queen tries to kill her. She flees from the kingdom, and only by the goodwill of her servant does she survive. She also learns that Posthumus has tried to kill her and has given orders for her to be killed. And this causes something of a crisis in her. She disguises herself as a man. Yet again, it's the last time Shakespeare wrote another trouser part for a woman, and she goes on her own odyssey. So in the same way as in King Lear, everybody is thrown out of the king's court, the same thing happens in Cymbeline, and the kingdom starts to disintegrate. Meanwhile, the war drums are starting. So the story becomes all the more complicated and complex. One of the most what we discover a whole new set of characters. While Imogen is out, she disguises herself as a man called Fidelis. She discovers her brothers, Arviragus and Guiderius, but doesn't know that's who it is. It turns out that the sons were not, they were stolen, but they were stolen by a Kent figure, a figure called Belarius, who was wronged by Cymbeline and stole his sons. But he's brought the sons up in the countryside, away from the court. Now, this all sounds like a summary, but it's the beginnings of imagery that is all of Shakespeare's plays and these ones, that the children in all the plays end up in exile. They're thrown out. They grow up not in the court, which is seen as corrupt. They grow up in the country. Same thing happens in The Winter's Tale. The same thing happens in The Tempest. And if anything, the problem with Cymbeline is that Shakespeare throws too many ideas at it. You've got images, the trouser play from As You Like It and Twelfth Night. You've got Othello and Iago. You've got King Lear, and you've got a whole new story of a kingdom in crisis. So all these characters start to revolve. There's an extra character, Cloten, who is the son of the queen. Now, what's interesting, when I saw this play, Cloten and Posthumus never share the stage. Both of them are pursuing Imogen, and Cloten is everything that Posthumus isn't. Cloten is an idiot. He's crude, he's vulgar, he's rude, he's disliked by almost everybody, but his mother wants him to marry Imogen so that he can be king. But what's interesting is, as I say, they never share the stage. At a key moment, Imogen is taken in by the brothers, who don't quite understand why they feel kinship with her. They think she's a boy. And Cloten, who's pursuing her, is killed by one of the brothers and beheaded. So it all gets a little bit grand guignol. And he leaves the body outside the cave where they're staying. And Imogen has taken the poison that the Queen has given her, but it's not a real poison. It actually comes back to life. We're back with Romeo and Juliet. She wakes up next to the body of Cloten. Now, the question here is, why does Shakespeare make sure that the two characters never meet each other? And in the production that I saw, it was the same actor playing Posthumus and Cloten. And we'll come on to the imagery of this in a moment. When Imogen wakes up, she finds the body of Cloten next to her with the head removed, and she thinks it's her husband's body. And this is the speech that she gives as she discovers the body. Kayleigh, take it away.
That's soft. No bedfellow. Oh God. Oh, sorry. Jake, I'm just letting you know my internet's not very good, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, that's okay. But the gremlins are out in force tonight. We'll just keep going, and if something goes wrong, we'll just move on.
It's soft, no bedfellow. Oh, gods and goddesses. These flowers are like the pleasures of the world. This bloody man, the care on't. I hope I dream, for so I thought I was a cave keeper and cook to honest creatures, but 'tis not so. 'Twas but a bolt of nothing, shot at nothing, which the brain makes of fumes. Our very eyes are sometimes, like our judgments, blind. Good faith, I tremble, stiff with fear. But if there be yet left in heaven as small a drop of pity as a wren's eye, feared gods, a part of it, the dream's here still. Even when I wake, it is without me, as within me, not imagined, felt. A headless man, the garments of Posthumus. I know the shape of his leg. This is his hand, his foot mercurial, his martial thigh, the brawns of Hercules. But his face, his jovial face, murder in heaven. How? 'Tis gone. Pisanio, all curses madded Hecuba gave the Greeks, and mine to boot be darted on thee. Thou conspired with that egregious devil, Cloten, hast here cut off my lord, to read and write be henceforth treacherous. Damned Pisanio hath with his forged letters, damned Pisanio and this most bravest vessel of the world struck up the main top. Oh, Posthumus, alas, where is thy head? Where's that? By me, where's that? Pisanio might have killed thee at the heart and left this head on. How should this be? Pisanio, 'tis he and Cloten, malice and the lucre in them have laid this woe here. Oh, 'tis pregnant. The drug he gave me, which he said was precious and cordial to me, have I not found it murderous to the senses? That confirms it home. This is Pisanio's deed, and Cloten's. Give colour to my pale cheek with thy blood, that we the horrider may seem to those which chance to find us. Oh, my lord. My lord.
Good, thank you very much. Good. Okay, so in the process of the story, Posthumus thinks Imogen is dead. Imogen thinks that Posthumus is dead. Guiderius and Arviragus both think that Imogen as Fidele is dead. Well, what Shakespeare's doing is giving us images of a complete death and rebirth. As the marriage breaks up or the love affair breaks up, as these mysterious kind of losses and the belief that people are dead are unfolding, the kingdom is also racing towards a war that nobody wants. So the idea is, yet again, what Shakespeare's doing is taking these mythical images of people dying, rings, sexual tricks, and he's using them to create this story which is a massive panorama about this country with all these different characters, lost children, all of it moving into one. So what you get with the play is this huge process of a breaking up of the kingdom, and these characters going on their own individual journeys, meeting each other, encountering each other, and then gradually they all converge on the final battle. And at the end of the play, after Cloten has died, the way that Shakespeare makes it work, it's as Posthumus changes. Posthumus realizes that he was wrong to be angry with Imogen. He's convinced he's killed her. He's racked with guilt, rather like as if Othello had been able to survive. And he decides to go back to England and fight on the... Initially, he goes on the side of the Romans, but he goes to fight on the side of the English. And he changes. The imagery of Cloten's death, it's as if a side of him has died. The side of him which is Cloten-like has died and fallen away, and what you're left with is a better Posthumus. So Posthumus actually wins the battle along with the two brothers who go and fight on the side of the English. So at the end of the play, it looks as if the English have defeated the Romans, and Cymbeline is about to win. Lucius, who's the Roman ambassador, is taken prisoner. But Posthumus makes the mistake of when he fights on the side of the English, he gets rid of his Roman clothing and fights as an Englishman. He then puts the Roman clothing on and is arrested and thrown into jail because they think he's a Roman soldier. And in jail, he's forced to confront everything that he's done. So he's in this prison, in the darkness, and he recognizes the sins he's committed against Imogen. And he is about to embrace his own death. So, Danny, can you give us that speech?
Most welcome, bondage. For thou art away, think, to liberty. Yet am I better than one that's sick of the gout, since he had rather groan so in perpetuity than be cured by the sure physician, death, who is the key to unbar these locks. My conscience, thou art fettered more than my shanks and wrists. You, good gods, give me the penitent instrument to pick that bolt then free forever. Is't enough, I am sorry. So children temporal fathers do appease. Gods are more full of mercy. Must I repent? I cannot do it better than in gyves, desired more than constrained. To satisfy, if of my freedom 'tis the main part, take no stricter render of me than my all. I know you are more clement than vile men, who of their broken debtors take a third, a sixth, a tenth, letting them thrive again on their abatement. That's not my desire. For Imogen's life, for Imogen's dear life, take mine. And though 'tis not so dear, yet 'tis alive. You coined it. 'Tween man and man, they weigh not every stamp, though light. Take pieces for the figure's sake. You rather mine, being yours, and so great powers. If you will take this audit, take this life, and cancel these cold bonds. Oh, Imogen, I'll speak to thee in silence.
Thank you, Danny. Lovely stuff. So once again, it takes place in a prison, and at this point, Posthumus sleeps, and this is the point where Shakespeare introduces the mask, and you have this massive spectacular moment where Posthumus's ancestors appear to him in his dreams and ask Jupiter to descend and rescue him and save him from his death. Jupiter descends, and you have this massive, magical, extraordinary encounter. Now, it's not just a mask scene. It's meant to have a more kind of revelatory feel, but it's an example of what Shakespeare's doing. which is taking the mask and using it in a different way. It's a divine intervention, a way of stepping in. And even the image of the prison, again, is one of those images in initiations, in myths. There's always a process in which someone has to go through some kind of death and rebirth in a dark place. So for instance, just as Christ spends 3 days in a tomb, Daniel spends time in a lion's den, Joseph is in a cave, Posthumus is in a prison. And in the prison, he sleeps, and he has a vision, and he's reborn. So what Shakespeare's doing, if he was to tell the full story chronologically or naturalistically, or let's say naturalistically, more like something in Othello, the play would be 14 hours long. Instead, what he does is compress it by using these images from romances and myths as almost like a shorthand to move the story on and give us a sense of psychological processes, not through giving us soliloquies, but giving us visual images of this, deaths and rebirths, being in prison, coming back to life, visitations from the gods. So he isn't just shoving a mask in just for the fun of it. He's putting it in as a moment of revelation and change in the story. And Jupiter, of course, is the king of the gods, which relates also to Cymbeline as the king of England, and the Emperor Augustus, who's the emperor at the time in Rome. Now, this leads us then into the amazing last act, and it's the last act of the play that actually makes a whole sense of the play and makes you start to understand why Shakespeare's written it in the way that he does. All the characters are gathered on stage, and at this point, everybody is disguised as somebody else. No one knows that Posthumus is Posthumus because he's disguised as a Roman prisoner. No one knows that Imogen is Imogen because she's disguised as a boy. No one knows that Arviragus and Guiderius are the sons of Cymbeline because even they don't know, because they haven't been told by Belarius who's hidden them. So everything is hidden, and as the scene moves on, gradually Shakespeare reveals who everybody is, and they're like bombshells of revelations as characters discover what's really going on. And the character who is magnificently changed is Cymbeline, as he gradually realizes that everything he's understood has been incorrect. It starts with news that the queen is dead, and that on her deathbed she confesses that she was conspiring against him, and then gradually, one by one, everything is revealed. And one of the key moments is when Iachimo himself, who's part of the Roman army, confesses to what he has done. Dan, can you give us that speech?
Your daughter's chastity. There it begins. He spake of her as Diane had hot dreams, and she alone were cold. Whereat I, wretch, made scruples of his praise, and wagered with him pieces of gold against this, which then he wore upon his honoured finger, to attain in suit the place of bed, and win this ring by hers and mine adultery. He, true knight, no lesser of her honour confident than I did truly find her, stakes this ring, and would so, had it been a carbuncle of Phoebus' wheel, and might so safely, had it been all the worth of Car. Away to Britain post I in this design. Well may you, sir, remember me at court, where I was taught of your chaste daughter the wide difference twixt amorous and villainous. Being thus quenched of hope, not longing, mine Italian brain gan in your duller Britain operate most vilely. For my vantage, excellent. And to be brief, my practice so prevailed that I returned with similar proof enough to make the noble Leonatus mad by wounding his belief in her renown, with tokens thus and thus averting notes of chamber hanging, pictures. This her bracelet, oh cunning, how I got it. Nay, some marks of secret on her person, that he could not but think her bond of chastity quite cracked, I haven't taken forfeit. Whereupon, methinks, I see him now.
Thank you, Dan. Brilliant. So this is a key moment because Posthumus then bursts out, reveals who he is, and is about to punish Iachimo, at which point Imogen realizes that he's still alive. And this is where this extraordinary tumult, everything starts to fall out and things are reconciled. Posthumus is bitterly apologetic to Imogen, and Imogen is relieved to have him return. This is another device. She seems to get over the fact that he tried to kill her, which, you know, could kill most relationships, but it being a Shakespeare, the depth of the love actually overcomes that. Now, Shakespeare's plays are full of, in particularly the comedies, where characters appear to be dead and then come back, and that's the revelation of this whole act. Cymbeline is restored. His daughter is restored to him. His brothers are restored to him. He realizes where he's gone wrong. And unlike Lear, who takes the whole kingdom down with him, the beauty of Cymbeline is that he recognizes he's gone wrong. And rather than resisting that change, he changes himself. There's a beautiful, before he speaks at the end and he presides, there's a beautiful moment between Imogen and Posthumus where they are restored. And one of the lovely things about this is this was apparently, in this little bit you're about to hear, this was Tennyson's favourite line, Lord Tennyson. And apparently Cymbeline, he was obsessed with Cymbeline and always slept with a copy by his bed or either under his pillow, I can't remember which. Now, this is the moment where finally, after all their adventures, Imogen and he are restored. Kayleigh and Danny, can you give us those lines? Danny? Oh, and he's disappeared. So we will have those lines in a second. So, Kayleigh, are you still there?
Sorry, Jay.
That's all right, the two lines, the dialogue, the moment when they're restored to each other.
Oh yeah, just give me 1 sec.
Kayleigh?
I'm good.
Are you ready?
Okay, so this is the moment when they're restored to each other, and they actually hug each other in this scene. It's one of the rare Shakespearean stage direction where they embrace each other. So when they deliver these lines, I want you to imagine them in each other's arms just after Imogen has her line. Okay, Kayleigh?
Why did you throw your wedded lady from you?
Okay, do you want to give us that again? It was broken up.
Why did you throw your wedded lady from you? Think that you are upon a rock, and now throw me again.
Hang there like a fruit, my soul, till the tree die.
Lovely. So that moment where they're united is the key moment in the whole thing. Now, the revelatory thing there is that Cymbeline accepts Posthumus as the husband of Imogen. And this is a really interesting thing politically to do with the plays. It's the only Shakespearean play where a commoner is allowed to marry a royal member of the royal family. It's quite radical for the time, and what's also interesting is at the end of the play he accepts his entire family, his sons and his daughter and his son-in-law, who is a commoner, who will rule after him, which is very unusual for the time. So at this point, what's also beautiful is the language Cymbeline uses when all this happens to him. So instead of being, again, raging Lear, he becomes something else. Edmund, can you give me that first little passage?
Oh, what am I? A mother to the birth of 3? Ne'er mother rejoiced deliverance more. Blessed may you be, that after this strange starting from your orbs, you may reign in them now. O Imogen, thou hast lost by this a kingdom.
Good, beautifully read, Edmund, thank you. Now, there's lots to be said about that speech. Notice what he says about a mother to, what is it, a mother to the birth of 3? Okay, so remember Danny's speech right at the beginning about if I could find the feminine in me, I would rip it out. And Lear rejecting his daughter. What Cymbeline does is become a mother as well as a father. So he connects with his feminine side. It's a truly remarkable line. And also there's something in what he says which explains to you the whole reason why Shakespeare has written the play the way he has. And I've talked about the fact that there's almost too many ideas in it, there's too many characters, but the idea in the play is that you've got this wonderful mixture of characters whose stories interact and flow together. Now, when he talks about the orbs, he talks about all these people having fallen out of their orbs and now being able to return and rule in them. He's using an image out of astrology. The orbs are where the planets go, where the stars go. He's talking about them in terms of a constellation. So his children have fallen out of their orbs and they will, now that they're restored, be restored. They will be returned to where they belong. And you realise that what you've actually got with the play is the theatrical equivalent of an astrolabe. Do you know what an astrolabe is? It's one of those devices which show you how the planets all fit together. That the characters start, they burst, all the characters come asunder, their stories interlock, and then gradually they're restored at the end in an image of harmony. And that's the metaphor he was trying to use. Now, it didn't necessarily work dramatically. It's a very difficult play. It's a baggy play. It's a long play. But that's what he was trying to do. Edmund, can you give us Cymbeline's final speech?
Oh, rare instinct. When shall I hear all through? This fierce abridgment hath to its circumstantial branches which distinction should be rich in. Where? How lived you? And when came you to serve our Roman captive? How parted with your brothers? How first met them? Why fled you from the court, and whither? These and your 3 motives to the battle, with I know not how much more, should be demanded, and all the other by-dependencies from chance to chance. But nor the time nor place will serve our long interrogatories. See, Posthumus anchors upon Imogen, and she, like harmless lightning, throws her eye on him, her brothers, me, her master, hitting each object with a joy. The countercharge is severally in all. Let's quit this ground and smoke the temple with our sacrifices. Thou art my brother, so we'll hold thee ever.
Thank you, Edmund. That's lovely. So the way Shakespeare uses Cymbeline to bless the whole kind of restoration of the kingdom. Now, before we move on to Leontes, thank you all of you for reading that. I want to bring up something that Paul Janis brought up last week about order. And he was talking about how Shakespeare often talks about the need for order. Other playwrights like Christopher Marlowe never care about order. It's all about revolutions. It's about overturning things. But Shakespeare is although he always writes about crisis, he always wants somehow to restore. There's this effort to try and restore order, but the order isn't necessarily conservative. It's the idea is that order and harmony, which is a cosmic harmony where you're in tune with things, is essential for the human race to survive. When the order is corrupt, when there's a poison in it, as we looked at in the tragedies, there's a necessary kind of shattering that has to happen. But the restoration of some kind of positive, beneficial order is something he's looking for, and particularly in these plays. And that's why at the end of Edmund's speech, he talks about the gods, about the temples. There's a kind of cosmic blessing, a divine blessing that goes on the whole thing. So thank you everybody for that. That was brilliant. So Shakespeare didn't know that Cymbeline wasn't going to be his last play. So he went on to write A Winter's Tale, presumably because he hadn't felt, either he just wanted to write another play, or he wanted to make some more money, or his people wanted him to write another play. But he certainly tried to perfect the form again. With this one, he tried to go much, much, much more linear, but there was also this huge gap of 16 years. There's a lot. It's another story about lost children in the same way that the brothers are lost in the first one. But in this one, he tries to do it in a linear way. And instead of making the characters and the stories wrap together like planets, he jumps at the end of the third act into 16 years to the next generation. And he does it by intervening a figure of time. He delivers this wonderful speech. So the story is much more of an effort to try and tell a story that has a kind of linearity to it. So also he focuses down the story on a very, very, very sharp, almost Greek, single-pointed drama at the beginning, which is the story of Leontes. Now you'll notice these names, Leonatus Posthumus and Leontes. It's the similar name, the Leonine kind of figure. Now Leontes is a king. At the beginning of the play, this play absolutely prioritizes sexual jealousy. Instead of doing this thing of crashing lots of plays together, we looked at how you had Iago, you had King Lear, you had Rosalind, and all those different things in this. He focuses it specifically on the one theme of sexual jealousy. And the first 3 acts, and again, are incredibly focused in this drama. And it's about the King Leontes' jealousy of his wife, Hermione. where he's convinced that Leontes is having an affair with his best friend Polixenes. Now, Shakespeare sets it all up that as boys, Polixenes and Leontes were like two peas in a pod. They're absolutely linked. They've been friends all their lives. Leontes is now the young king of, I get lost, it's Sicilia, I think it is. And Polixenes is visiting, and Hermione, and he's trying, at the beginning of the story, he's trying to persuade Polixenes to stay for a few more weeks. And when Polixenes politely refuses, Leontes asks his wife to persuade Polixenes to do it, and she succeeds. But she does it like a hostess, a flirtatious hostess. But there's nothing genuinely flirtatious about it. She's warm, she's witty with him, and eventually Polixenes agrees to stay. At which point, Leontes, something goes wrong for Leontes. Can we have that scene, please, Danny?
Mm. Is he won yet?
He'll stay, my lord.
At my request, he would not. Hermione, my dearest, thou never spokest to better purpose.
Never.
Never, but once.
What? Have I twice said well? When was't before? I prithee, tell me. Crams with praise and makes us fat as tame things. One good deed dying tongueless slaughters 1,000 waiting upon that. Our praises are our wages. You may ride with one soft kiss 1,000 furlongs, ere with spur we beat an acre. But to the goal, my last good deed was to entreat his stay. What was my first? It has an elder sister, or I mistake you. Oh, would her name were Grace! But once before I spoke to the purpose. When? Nay, let me have't, I long.
Why, that was when 3 crabbed months I had soured themselves to death, ere I could make thee open thy white hand and clap thyself my love. Then didst thou utter, I am yours forever.
'Tis Grace indeed. Why, lo you now, I have spoke to the purpose twice. The one for ever earned a royal husband, the other for some while a friend.
Too hot, too hot. To mingle, friendship far is mingling bloods. I have tremor cordis on me. My heart dances, but not for joy, not joy. This entertainment may a free face put on, derive a liberty from heartiness, from bounty, fertile bosom, and well become the agent. To me, I grant, but to be paddling palms and pinching fingers as now they are, and making practice smiles as in a looking glass, and then to sigh as 'twere the more to the dear. Oh, that is entertainment my bosom likes not, nor my brows.
Good, thank you, Danny. Brilliant. So once again, you can see, yeah, so Leontes completely flies off the handle. That's all, that little speech was another one of those interior monologues. Remember we talked about the introversion of Shakespeare's characters. He's someone who's, you're seeing inside someone's tortured soul. Now it's often, there's only 3 acts in which you have to go through the whole cycle of Leontes going completely berserk and then almost destroying his wife and certainly losing his son. And it's often talked about that Shakespeare doesn't bother to give Leontes a reason for his jealousy. And part of, one thing you can say about that is what Shakespeare was doing was compressing it once again. You've got, this jealousy kicks off after about 5 pages. He doesn't give you time to get into his mind and find out why he's doing it. But also, crucially, he doesn't give you an Iago or an Iachimo figure. Leontes' jealousy is purely to do with his own psychology. Now, when I did it, and Rob is here, I think, who played my Leontes, we talked about, we did an improvisation. We couldn't actually unlock what it was. And what we came up with was that there is a deep insecurity in Leontes. And it stems, the reason why he brings up this story about it took 3 months or whatever it was, 6 months before you said you'd marry me. He doesn't truly believe that Hermione truly loves him. It's not secure inside him. There's also the feeling that in some sense Hermione's getting between him and Polixenes. But whatever happens, something rips him apart. And what Shakespeare takes Leontes' mental health far further than someone like Othello. He becomes almost insane. Danny, can you give us the next speech?
is whispering nothing, is leaning cheek to cheek, is meeting noses, kissing with inside lip, stopping the career of laughing with a sigh, a note infallible of breaking honesty, horsing foot on foot, skulking in corners, wishing clocks more swift, hours, minutes, noon, midnight, and all eyes blind with the pin and web but theirs only, that would unseen be wicked. Is this nothing? Why then the world and all that's in it is nothing. The covering sky is nothing, Bohemia nothing, my wife is nothing, nor nothing have these nothings, if this be nothing.
Brilliant, thank you, Danny. The reason why I chose to do the play was I saw a very bad production of it being done by other students, but I was really struck with the intensity of this first half of the play. And I was a big Strindberg fan at the time, and I still am, and this reminded me of Strindberg, of the madness that Leontes is going through. If you listen to where he talks, the whole thing dissolves into the word nothing at the end. Now, the challenge of the play, and my mum said this to me when I was doing it at the time, is how do you make Leontes sympathetic? The whole purpose of the play, not purpose of the play, is what happens at the end of the play is Leontes is redeemed. Now, if Shakespeare wants a character to be redeemed, he means there's something that's redeemable in them. And I remember when we were working on the speech, on the play, we realized that if you listen to what everybody says, everybody loves Leontes. Even Hermione loves Leontes when he's punishing her. Everybody, his reputation as being a wonderful king and a person everyone admires. So there obviously is a good person in there. And as you're rehearsing the play, you have to find those moments of vulnerability in it. Now, the other thing that's interesting about the play, and a friend of mine put this, he said it was Shakespeare's apology to women. Because well, you'll see as it goes on. Now, one of the characters that really brings that to life is the character of Paulina, who is Antigonus's wife. And she is the only person in the entire kingdom who's willing to face Leontes. So the scene that we're going to deal with now, Leontes has arrested and imprisoned Hermione for adultery. Polixenes has fled, so he's convinced that he's guilty. And in this scene, all the lords have tried to convince Leontes that he's wrong. And the one person who decides they're going to take him on is Paulina, and she brings in with her his baby. Hermione is pregnant, she's given birth to a girl, which of course for Leontes, who at this time doesn't trust any women, the idea that it's a daughter is horrific to him, and he's convinced it's Polixenes' child, which is completely impossible because he would have had to have slept with Hermione 9 months before, and he's only been staying for a month. But at that point, Leontes' arithmetic isn't that strong. So this scene, Paulina bursts in. Off we go, please.
How does the boy? Not very good.
Nigel?
Oh, right. I thought I was Lord further down.
Oh, you are the Lord. That is the Lord, isn't it? Yes. So let's have that again.
Oh, it says first servant. I think that's why.
Oh, sorry, Nigel. That should be the Lord as well. My apologies.
That's all right. Yeah.
Okay. So, again. So when he talks about the boy, he's talking about his son Mamilius. Okay.
Yeah.
How does the boy?
He took good rest tonight. 'Tis hoped his sickness is discharged.
To see his nobleness. Conceiving the dishonour of his mother, he straight declined, drooped, took it deeply, fastened and fixed the shame in himself, threw off his spirit, his appetite, his sleep, and downright languished. Leave me solely, go, see how he fares. Fie. No thought of him. The thought of my revenges that way recoil in me, upon me. In himself too mighty, and in his parties, his alliance, let him be, until a time may serve. For present vengeance, take it on her. Camillo and Polixenes laugh at me, make their pastime at my sorrow. They should not laugh if I could reach them, nor shall she within my power.
You must not enter.
Nay, rather, good my lords, be second to me. Fear you his tyrannous passion more, alas, than the queen's life? A gracious, innocent soul, more free than he is jealous.
That's enough.
Madam, he hath not slept tonight. commanded none should come at him.
Not so hot, good sir. I come to bring him sleep. 'Tis such as you that creep like shadows by him and do sigh at his needless heavings. Such as you nourish the cause of his awaking. I'd come with words as medicinal as true, honest as either, to purge him of that humour that presses him from sleep.
What noise there, Hope?
No noise, my lord, but needful conference about some gossips for your highness.
How? Away with that audacious lady. Antigonus, I charged thee that she should not come about me. I knew she would.
I told her so, my lord. On your displeasure's peril and on mine, she should not visit you.
What, canst not rule her?
From all dishonesty he can. In this, unless he takes the course that you have shown, commit me for committing honour, trust it, he shall not rule me.
There you now, you hear. When she will take the rein, I let her run, but she'll not stumble.
Good my liege, I come and I beseech you, hear me, who profess myself your loyal servant, your physician, your most obedient counsellor, yet that dare less appear in so comforting your evils than such as most seem yours. I say I come from your good queen.
Good queen.
Good queen, my lord. Good queen, I say good queen, and would by combat make her good, so were I a man the worst about you.
Force her hence.
Let him that makes but trifles of his eyes first hand me. On mine own accord I'll off. But first I'll do my errand. The good queen, for she is good, hath brought you forth a daughter. Here 'tis. Commends it to your blessing.
Out. A mankind witch. Hence with her out a door, a most intelligencing board.
Not so. I am as ignorant in that as you in so entitling me, and no less honest than you are mad, which is enough, I'll warrant, as this world goes, to pass for honest.
Traitors! Will you not push her out? Give her the bastard, thou dotard. Thou art woman-tired and roosted by thy dame partlet here. Take up the bastard, take it up, I say. Give to thy crone.
For ever unvenerable be thy hands if thou takest up the princess by that forced baseness which he has put upon.
He dreads his wife.
So I would you did. 'Twere past all doubt you'd call your children yours.
A nest of traitors.
I am none, by this good light.
Nor I, nor any, but one that's here, and that's himself. For he the sacred honour of himself, his queens, his hopeful sons, his babes, betrays to slander, which sting is sharper than the swords, and will not, for as the case now stands, it is a curse he cannot be compelled to, once remove the root of his opinion, which is rotten as ever oak or stone was sound.
A callet of boundless tongue, who late hath beat her husband and now baits me. This brat is none of mine. It is the issue of Polixenes, hence with, and together with the dam, commit them to the fire.
It is yours! And might we lay the old proverb to your charge, so like you 'tis the worse. Behold, my lords, although the print be little, the whole matter and copy of the father, eye, nose, lip, the tricks of frown, his forehead, nay, the valley, the pretty dimples of his chin and cheek, his smiles, the very mould and frame of hand, nail, finger, and thou, good goddess nature, which hast made it so like to him that got it, thou hast the ordering of the mind too, mongst all colours, no yellow in't. Lest she suspects, as he does, her children, not her husband's.
A gross hag. And, Losel, thou art worthy to be hanged, that wilt not stay her tongue.
Hang all the husbands that cannot do the feat. You'll leave yourself hardly one subject.
Once more, take her hence.
A most unworthy and unnatural lord can do no more.
I'll have thee burnt.
I care not. It as is an heretic that makes the fire, not she which burns it. I'll not call you tyrant, but this most cruel usage of your queen, not able to produce more accusation than your own weak-hinged fancy, something savoury of tyranny, and will ignoble make you, yea, scandalous to the world.
On your allegiance, out of the chamber with her. Were I a tyrant? Where were her life? She does not call me so. If she did know me one, away with her.
I pray you do not push me. I'll be gone.
Good, thank you very much. Great. You can see the sheer intensity of that act. You can also see that the language is incredibly direct. And so what Shakespeare was doing was compressing a 5-act play into 3 acts. There's more kind of emotional energy in that than some full length plays I've ever encountered. The reason I say it's his apology to women is at this point, Paulina is speaking for all those women in Shakespeare's plays, Ophelia, Cordelia, Desdemona, who've been destroyed by men. She's fighting back. And Shakespeare is using shorthand to deal with these male insecurities. It's a brilliant scene. And yet at the same time, you can see the humanity in Leontes, the fear, the insecurity, the panic, and the awareness that he's going wrong. That's why he doesn't want to be seen as a tyrant. So the whole thing builds to an incredible head. It's like a kind of roller coaster. And the new child has been born, and what Leontes orders Antigonus, that Faz was playing, to throw her out, to take her away and leave her somewhere in a distant land and let her die. Meanwhile, he puts Hermione on trial. But the interesting thing is, he also, rather like Oedipus, goes to the Apollo to ask for the truth. Now, what's interesting there is, once again, if he's gone to Apollo, it means that there's doubt in him. There's a side in him which knows that it's not right. He wants the ultimate divine truth to tell him the truth. Now, the other interesting thing about the play is that Apollo rules over his kingdom. When we get to the countryside, it's the goddess Demeter. So it's 2 entirely different deities that are talked about there. So, sorry. No? Okay. Leontes puts Hermione on trial, and this is the speech where she defends herself. Now, she's breaking up at that point. She starts off very calm, and he knocks her back on everything until she finally loses it. But what's interesting about this speech is that there's still care for him in it. Take it away, Hannah.
Sir, spare your threats. The bug which you would fright me with I seek. To me can life be no commodity. The crown and comfort of my life, your favour, I do give lost, for I feel it gone, but know not how it went. My second joy and first fruits of my body, from his presence I am barred like one infectious. My third comfort, starred most unluckily, is from my breast, the innocent milk in its most innocent mouth, held out to murder, myself on every post, proclaimed a strumpet, with immodest hatred, the childbed privilege denied, which longs to women of all fashion. Lastly, hurried here, to this place, in the open air, before I have got strength of limit. Now, my liege, tell me what blessings I have here alive, that I should fear to die. Therefore proceed, but yet hear this, mistake me not. No life? I prize it not a straw, but for mine honour, which I would free. If I shall be condemned upon surmises, all proof sleeping else but what your jealousies awake, I tell you, 'tis rigour and not law.
Thank you, Hannah.
Your honour,
sorry, carry on. I've interrupted you. Sorry.
Yes, your honours all. I do refer me to the oracle.
Thank
Apollo be my judge.
Sorry, Hannah, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's really, but it's quite, I shouldn't have done also, because the key there is that Apollo is where it ends. Now, at that point, the message comes from Apollo that in fact Hermione is innocent, Leontes is a tyrant, and everybody thinks it's all over. But Leontes refuses to accept it and starts to plough ahead. And then the news comes that his son has died, and that's what destroys him. Hermione collapses, the news comes that she's dead. I'm summarising it all because a lot of you may not have read the play. And at the end of that first act, the whole kingdom has just been devastated. He's lost everything. And we then lose that story. Those first 3 acts, he disappears, and we move suddenly to another part of the world. We move to Bohemia, which oddly enough has not got a sea, but at that point Antigonus is dropped off there with the baby, and he leaves the baby and is famously killed by a bear. And the baby is found by a shepherd and his son. And there's this beautiful line, thou comest from things dying, I things newborn. And at that point the story shifts, and these 2 bucolic characters, they're comic characters, they bring the child up. The child is called Perdita. Now, this is where the play gets very complicated, because the sudden half of the play, you're suddenly in this massive pastoral comedy with dirty jokes, trickster figures, satyrs dancing, and what seems to be an entirely different world. Leontes doesn't feature. Perdita is grown up, and she's fallen in love with Florizel, who is the son of Polixenes. And Polixenes has turned up because he's concerned that his son is spending too much time with the shepherd girl. She doesn't know, like Cymbeline's children, sons, that she is actually the daughter of Leontes. So once again, you have the corruption of the court. The court has collapsed, and the child is lost, and the child is brought up in the countryside among the trees and a warm, loving atmosphere. Now, it's really hard to make this work with the theatre director, because it seems like an entirely different play. And when I was originally directed it, what I loved was the first 3 acts, which seemed so intense, but I had no idea how you do the comic scenes, the pastoral scene. And to my amazement, the pastoral scene was actually one of the easiest parts of the whole thing to make work. And the thing that gave it to me was we were rehearsing it in my university, and we didn't have a rehearsal room. So we had to rehearse, Rob, you might remember this, we had to go and rehearse outside in the lawn. It was the middle of summer. And to our amazement, the scene just made sense. It just came to life. As soon as you actually were doing it in nature, the rhythms and the life of the whole thing just took off. And you realize that the whole point of that act is what they'd call the great goddess nature. Demeter is the ruler of that. And you realize that the comedy and the laughter and the sexuality of it and the love of it is, the whole idea is that is what is bringing Perdita up. That is what's blessing her. And the odd thing, Perdita is a child of nature. She talks about flowers and all these different things. And one of the most extraordinary things about what she talks a lot about Proserpine. Proserpine being Persephone, the goddess of the underworld. Now, we all know the story of Persephone, captured by Hades, taken under the ground, and only allowed to come above ground 6 months every year. And it's a classic image of death and rebirth, once again, but specifically feminine death and rebirth. And Shakespeare puts it in there deliberately because of what he does at the end of the play. Now, the other big trick of that play, we'll get to that in a second, trick of the play is you need a wonderful comic actor to play Autolycus. And this is one of the things, what's tricky about these late plays is the comedy scenes are very hard to make work unless you know who's going to play those parts and really bring them to life. I was happy enough to have a really good Autolycus, which is great. Now, the reason I bring up Persephone is that the famous twist of Winter's Tale is that through the machinations of the script, Perdita and Florizel go and hide. They go to Leontes for help because their father Polixenes doesn't want them to marry. And Leontes has spent 16 years mourning and being penitent at the death of what he did to Hermione. And Paulina has been watching over him all this time. And when he encounters his daughter, which he doesn't know at that point is his daughter, and also Florizel, he's deeply moved and agrees to take him in, and also to persuade Polixenes to let them be together. And gradually, the last act becomes about the thawing of Leontes' world. And you realize that the whole structure of the story, its metaphor is the seasons. You go from winter, which is at the beginning, into summer, and then you go into a new kind of winter coming spring at the end. And at the end of the play, Shakespeare one of the most incredible magical scenes I've ever had the pleasure of direct. You learn that Paulina has a statue of Hermione that he wants to show Leontes. And at this point, everybody's reconciled. He's found out that Perdita is actually his daughter. Polixenes is reconciled to him, and the wounds are healed. But the only wound that hasn't been healed is the wound with Hermione. And Paulina takes him to see the statue, and they're all present to see it. And it's one of the most extraordinarily beautiful scenes you've ever seen. What I want you to imagine, if you haven't seen the play, is that you're in a chapel, and Shakespeare's very specific that it's a chapel, and they're all gathered there. Leontes, Polixenes, who he's wronged, Paulina, Florizel and Perdita, and also Camillo, his faithful servant. And what Paulina is about to do is reveal the statue of Hermione. And we're going to take it away. So this is a very special scene. And at a certain point, a transformation takes place to the statue. All right, off you go.
O grave and good Paulina, the great comfort that I have had of thee.
What, sovereign sir, I did not well, I meant well. All my services you have paid home, but that you have vouchsafed with your crowned brother and these your contracted heirs of your kingdoms, my poor house to visit. It is a surplus of your grace which never my life made less to answer.
Oh, Paulina, we honour you with trouble, but we came to see the statue of our queen. Your gallery have we passed through, not without much content in many singularities, but we saw not that which my daughter came to look upon, the statue of her mother.
As she lived peerless, though her dead likeness, I do well believe, excels whatever yet you'd looked upon or hand of man hath done. Therefore, I keep it lonely, apart. But here it is. Prepare to see the life as lively mocked as ever still sleep mocked death. Behold, and say 'tis well. I like your silence. It the more shows off your wonder, but yet speak first. You, my liege, comes it not something near?
Her natural posture. Chide me, dear stone, that I may say indeed thou art Hermione, or rather, thou art she in thy not chiding, for she was as tender as infancy and grace. But yet, Paulina Hermione was not so much wrinkled, nothing so aged as this seems.
Oh, not by much.
So much the more our carver's excellence, which lets go by some 16 years and makes her as she lived now.
As now she might have done, so much to my good comfort as it is now piercing to my soul. Oh, thus she stood, even with such life of majesty, warm life, as now it coldly stands when first I wooed her. I am ashamed. Does not the stone rebuke me for being more stone than it? Oh, royal peace, there's magic in thy majesty, which has my evils conjured to remembrance, and from thy admiring daughter took the spirit, standing like stone with thee.
And give me leave, and do not say 'tis superstition, that I kneel and then implore her blessing. Lady, dear queen, that ended when I but began, give me that hand of yours to kiss.
Oh, patience! The statue is but newly fixed, the colour's not dry.
My lord, your sorrow was too sore laid on, which 16 winters cannot blow away. So many summers dry, scarce any joy did ever so long live. No sorrow but killed itself much sooner.
Dear my brother, let him that was the cause of this have power to take off so much grief from you as he will peace up in himself.
Indeed, my lord, if I had thought the sight of my poor image would thus have wrought you, for the stone is mine, I'd not have showed it.
Do not draw the curtain.
No longer shall you gaze on't, lest your fancy may think anon it moves.
Let be. Would I were dead, but that methinks already. What was he that did make it? See, my lord, would you not deem it breathed? And that those veins did verily bear blood?
Masterly done. The very life seems warm upon her lip.
The fixture of her eyes has motion in it, as we are marked with art.
I'll draw the curtain. My lord's almost so far transported that he'll think anon it lives.
Sweet Paulina, makes me to think so 20 years together. No settled senses of the world can match the pleasure of that madness. Let it alone.
I am sorry, sir, I have thus far stirred you, but I could afflict you further.
Do, Paulina, for this affliction has a taste as sweet as any cordial comfort. Still, methinks there is an air comes from her. What fine chisel could ever yet cut breath? Let no man mock me, for I will kiss her.
Good my lord, forbear. The ruddiness upon her lip is wet. You'll mar it if you kiss it. Stain your own with oily painting. Shall I draw the curtain?
No, not these 20 years.
So long could I stand by, a looker on.
Either forbear, quit presently the chapel, or resolve you for more amazement, if you can behold it. I'll make the statue move indeed, descend and take you by the hand, but then you'll think, which I protest against, I am assisted by wicked powers.
What you can make her do, I am content to look on. What to speak, I am content to hear, for 'tis as easy to make her speak as move.
It is required you do awake your faith. Then all stand still. On. Those that think it is unlawful business I am about, let them depart.
Proceed, no foot shall stir.
Music, awake her. Strike. 'Tis time. Descend. Be stone no more. Approach. Strike all that look upon with marvel. Come, I'll fill your grave up. Stir, nay, come away. Bequeath to death your numbness, for from him dear life redeems you. You perceive, she stirs. Start not. Her actions shall be holy as you hear my spell is lawful. Do not shun her until you see her die again, for then you kill her double. Nay, present your hand. When she was young, you wooed her. Now in age, is she become the suitor?
Oh, she's warm. If this be magic, let it be an art lawful as eating.
She embraces him.
She hangs about his neck. If she pertain to life, let her speak too.
Aye, and make this manifest where she has lived, or house stolen from the dead.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, it's an absolutely beautiful scene. Carl, if you're still with us, that's a scene. I was going to try and play some music there, but I didn't think it was going to work. I think the gremlins are out. So, but the key there is that the music is key to that scene. It's a very hallowed scene. It's a magical, magical scene in which Hermione comes back to life. You don't know whether Hermione is a statue coming to life or whether it's Hermione who's been hidden. But whatever the case, what Shakespeare is doing is creating the most beautiful stage metaphor for the restoration of a damaged relationship. Now, the key thing is it takes a long time for Hermione to step down. And to make the scene work, Paulina is almost like a magician. She's almost presiding over the whole thing. Hermione isn't ready to come down straight away. Paulina's judged the moment because she can see the love in Leontes and the way he never thinks he's going to get Hermione back, but he's willing to stay away for 20 years looking at this statue. So I remember when we did it, we used John Taverner, the projecting veil, which I would have played at this point, but it worked beautifully. And somehow, if you believe in the magic of it, the imagery just works quite wonderfully. And as I say, it's him using these poetic images to concertina the story. Because again, if he told the full story of 16 years of separation and all that kind of stuff, and then how the relationship happens, it would be 16 hours long. What he's doing is starting to perfect the form of these romances so that these magical images tell you the story that he wants to tell. And what's beautiful here is you can see him with these last three plays desperately trying to heal the male wounds that he's written about all his life, that the women are becoming stronger and stronger and purer, and they're the ones who actually carry the future on. And the men, he's using this shorthand to try and deal with the issues that he'd always dealt with in all his plays, either comically or tragically, before he ended his theatre altogether. So the last play we move on to is The Tempest. Now, for me, this is the play in which he perfected the form he was trying to do. This is his most magical play. It has a wizard or a magician at the center of it. There are magical creatures. There's Caliban, who's the animal creature. There's Ariel, there's pure air. There's spell, there's wizardry, there's a magical island. And an fascinating thing about the magical island, I noticed when I directed it with students, is the magical island appears differently to everybody who's on it. So Stefano and Antonio think it's a horrible island with scrub everywhere, whereas Gonzalo sees it as this wonderful, rich, beautiful island. And I hadn't noticed that until I did it recently. And you see that actually the island reflects back to each person on it what they see. And as a director and as an actor and as a designer, you can have a huge amount of rich fun really exploring the magic of the island. When I did it, Lost had just come to an end. Remember the series Lost, set on the weird island where everything was going on? And we actually found that enormously helpful in trying to access what this play was all about. Now, the reason why, when I talk about him perfecting his form on this one, is we talked about how Cymbeline was this big baggy play with all these characters flying around and then harmonizing, and how The Winter's Tale is like two plays cut in the middle with a comedy and a happy ending, where Leontes disappears for an entire act. The beauty of The Tempest is that for some reason what Shakespeare did was return to the Greek unities. Apart from the shipwreck at the beginning, everything happens in real time in the play. It all happens in one location. It happens over 24 hours. And somehow he formalizes it almost perfectly. The problem is, how do you have the 16-minute gap, the 16-year shift? In Cymbeline, you had the brothers who had been lost. In Pericles, you had the daughter who'd been lost. And in Winter's Tale, again, it was the daughter who had been lost and the wife. In this one, he's obviously decided that it's not going to work telling it linearly. So he compresses the story into a very, very, very tight narrative. It's one of Shakespeare's shortest plays. I think the only other play that's shorter than it is Macbeth, interestingly enough, or Comedy of Errors. Those are the three shortest. So the amazing thing about The Tempest is it starts after the catastrophe, 16 years after the catastrophe, in which Prospero, who was the Duke of Milan, got too involved in his books, too involved in study of the esoteric and the mystical and learning, and was ousted in a coup by his brother, Antonio, who was in alliance with the King Alonso, I think, of where Alonso is, Naples, King of Naples. And this has all happened 16 years before. Shakespeare doesn't show you any of this. The way he does it is to dramatize it in the very, very first scene, where Prospero, who's this exiled magus and duke on an island, the only other person on the island that he's got with him is his daughter Miranda, decides that after 16 years it's time to tell her the story. It's a really hard scene to make work because essentially it's a massive chunk of exposition. But when I worked in it, I realized that the only way you can make it work is for Prospero to completely relive it emotionally as he goes. And one of the things that comes out of the story he tells to his daughter is his anger. And the power of the Tempest, this is what's so interesting, is it is actually about a man trying to control his rage, a man who's trying to resolve it. Now, he is a magus, he is a wizard. He talks about his magic as being my most potent art. And the power of the play is that at the beginning of the story, you have another shipwreck, as you've seen with Pericles, which is an image of the tempest of the mind, however you want to talk about it. You remember the tempest, the storm that Lear goes through. And what happens is all Prospero's enemies are washed up on the shore. And in the process of the play, he uses his magic to maneuver them around the island until they have their final confrontation with him. So the people who betrayed him, his brother and Alonso and other characters, there's also Alonso's son, Ferdinand, who he tries to maneuver and separate from them so that he will fall in love with Miranda and the two kingdoms will be united in a marriage. So what you get is this extraordinary chess game that's going on the island, where he's trying to harmonize his life, as it were, the politics of his life, so he can return to Milan and take back what's his. Now, the thing that spins it and makes it absolutely astonishing and takes it into magical realms that the other two plays are moving towards but haven't quite got are the figures of Ariel and Caliban. Now, Caliban is the son of Sycorax, who was a kind of chthonic mother figure who used to, a kind of witch goddess, whatever you want to call her, who used to control the island and imprisoned Ariel in a tree. And Ariel will come to in a second, but Caliban is described in the story as this animalistic, he's a tortoise, he's misshapen, he's ugly, he's dark and demonic. But what we find is that he wasn't always like that, that originally when Prospero found him, there was a different relationship between them, which we'll see in a second. So that's one of the kind of mystical and magical animals on the island. The other is Ariel, which is a spirit of pure air. Now Ariel is an incredible creation from Shakespeare, and is in many ways a kind of evolution of Puck. If Puck was the kind of trickster figure, Ariel is still a trickster figure, but a higher version of that. Now, I've talked in the other plays about alchemy in Shakespeare's plays. There's a very interesting, there's a Jung, but as you all know, Carl Jung writes a lot about alchemy. He writes an entire essay on the figure of Mercurius from alchemy, and Mercurius is Hermes. And the idea of the alchemists is they were trying to control this cosmic energy known as Mercurius and try and bottle it and use it to create spiritual transformation. And the first thing that Jung quotes in this is the description of Mercurius trapped in a tree. And it's absolutely word for word what Shakespeare took the backstory of Ariel about, that Ariel is the energy of Mercurius in the play. Now, there are lots of other ways of looking at this, that Caliban represents the animal side of Prospero, whether it's a symbol of his interior existence, that the sexuality is violence, the unregenerated animal nature of man, and Ariel is the higher spiritual side, and Prospero is caught between the two. And what's so interesting in the play is the way Prospero is trying to be an inspired figure. He's trying to heal, he's trying to correct, but he's battling all the way through with his anger. And in many ways, when I talked about how the first play is a rewrite of King Lear, Cymbeline is a rewrite of King Lear, The Winter's Tale is a rewrite, is trying to heal the wound of Othello. Each one is trying to heal a wound of the tragedies. The Tempest is like a healing of the wound of Hamlet, to do with the fact that it's about revenge and justice and how you make that work. So the first time we meet Caliban, Prospero has already told Miranda the truth about what happened to her and how he was exiled and they were thrown on a boat and the boat was shipwrecked on this island, and how all the enemies are now at hand. And he summons Caliban from who he uses as his servant. This is a fascinating scene because it tells you everything. It's a lot of anger in it, but also within it, Shakespeare compresses this incredible backstory of the three of them. Please take it away.
This wicked Jew as ere my mother brushed with raven's feather from wholesome fen, drop on ye both. The southward blow on ye and blister you o'er.
For this be sure, tonight thou shalt have cramps, side stitches that shall pen thy breath up. Urchins shall, for that vast of night that they may work, all exercise on thee. Thou shalt be pinched as thick as honeycomb, each pinch more stinging than bees that made 'em.
I must eat my dinner. This island's mine. Sycorax, my mother, which thou takest from me. When thou camest first, thou strokest me, and maddest of me wouldst give us her. Water with berries in, and teach me how to name the bigger light, and how the less that burn by day and night. And then I love thee, and show thee all the qualities of the isle, the fresh springs, spring pits, barren place, and fertile. Cursed be I that did so. All the charms of Sycorax, toads, beetles, bats, light on you. For I am all the subjects that you had, which first was mine own king. And here you stymie in this rock, whilst you do keep me from the rest of the island.
Thou most lying slave, whom stripes may move, not kindness. I have used thee, filth as thou art, with human care, and lodged thee in mine own cell, till thou didst seek to violate the honour of my daughter.
Oh, would it have been done? Thou didst prevent me. I have peopled else this isle with Caliban.
The bored slave, which any prince of goodness wilt not take being capable of all
Kayleigh,
I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak.
Kayleigh, hang on. Do you want to hold it for a second? You're
one thing or other, when thou didst not savage, know thine own meat.
Sorry, Kayleigh, can you hear me? Sorry, guys. I think the gremlins are out there. It is breaking up. Kayleigh, you there? Okay, she's lost the signal, I'm afraid. Okay, so before that happened, sorry about that. You can see the tension between the three of them. The story back there that when Caliban was first on the island, when Prospero was first on the island, Caliban was behind. Prospero loved him and helped him. Sorry, Kayleigh, do you want to do that speech again?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry, guys, just have that speech again.
Abhorred slave, which any prince of goodness wilt not take, being capable of all ill. I pitied thee, took pains to make thee speak, taught thee each hour one thing or other. When thou didst not, savage, know thine own meaning, but wouldst gabble like a thing most brutish, I endowed thy purposes with words that made them known. But thy vile race, though thou didst learn, had that in which natures could not abide to be with. Therefore wast thou deservedly confined into this rock, who hadst deserved more than a prison.
You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. The red plague rid you for learning me your language.
Hag seed, hence! Fetch us in fuel, and be quick, thou best, to answer other business. Shrugst thou malice? If thou neglect'st, or dost unwillingly what I command, I'll rack thee with old cramps. Fill all thy bones with aches, make thee roar that beasts shall tremble at thy din.
No, pray thee. I must obey. He's out of such power it would control my damn's good Cepedus and make a vassal of him.
So, slave, hence!
Good. So you can see there, there's loads going on. There's only a tiny 3 or 4 pages of stuff, but you see there whole systems of anger and rape and suppression and oppression, all those different things. But one of the interesting things about Caliban is that he speaks in poetry. So historically, Caliban has always been seen as an evil character. If you look at it from the Victorian era and all those different people, when we look at him now, there's something far more about him. And the fact that he has the poetry elevates him to a higher mode than just a kind of comic character or as a villain. And one of the most powerful things about Caliban is that Shakespeare seems to invest enormous sympathy in him, although he's appallingly treated by Prospero, but also he has this background of trying to rape Miranda. You have all this enormous complexity. Now, a lot of modern interpretations look at the colonial side of all this in terms of a metaphor for what European settlers did to indigenous people all over the world. And that's very much something that I think inspired Shakespeare. At the same time, he took it also into archetypal realms where he was dealing with a man's issues with his own sexual nature, his own animal nature, all those different things. And you're struck in the play by the cruelty of Prospero, and quite a lot of it, aligned with a weariness and a sadness and a poetry and a melancholy. Now, with Caliban, I remember I was talking to Robin about this, in the same way that when he wrote Merchant of Venice, he couldn't help getting carried away with the humanity of Shylock. He gives Caliban one of the most beautiful speeches in the play. So Caliban ends up being caught up in a plot against Prospero, which is led by 2 of the serving people, I think the cook and the clown from the ship. He doesn't realize that they're idiots, but they enlist him as a way of defeating and killing Prospero. So Caliban ends up almost recreating the same usurpation, the same throwing out of Prospero that he suffered with his brother. But at a certain point, Prospero knows what's going on, and he sends Ariel to confuse them. And Ariel sings and panics them. And as these two men panic, Caliban has this extraordinary speech about the island. Faz, can you give it to us? You need to unmute. You need to unmute.
Be not afraid. The isle is full of noises, sounds, and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometimes voices that, if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then, in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me that, when I waked, I cried to dream again.
Beautiful, thank you very much. Now the imagery there, again, you've got alchemical images of gold pouring on you. So within Caliban, who Prospero doesn't recognize as having anything special about him, he thinks he's pure darkness. Caliban is able to dream and have these extraordinary visions and has a connection to the island and the magic of the island. So the island is truly his, and Prospero hasn't recognized within him what he really is. So the contrast to Caliban is Ariel, who is pure air and is a magical creature, and Prospero has a love for air. Only he can see Ariel. Ariel is able to perform the magic that Prospero is able to perform. And many people see Ariel also not just as Prospero's higher side, but also his art, that it's a metaphor for Shakespeare's own imagination and creativity. And what you've got there is a man caught between the beauty of Ariel and his contempt for what Caliban is. And it's a classic split between spirit and body, you might say. That what Prospero hasn't dealt with is his physical side. At the time, there was a lot of talk in intellectual terms about how there was Renaissance humanism. If we could suppress our animal instincts, our bodies and all that kind of stuff, we could then ascend to a godlike status. And in a funny kind of way, that is what Prospero's been trying to do. Now, the key moment in the play, which I think is the turning point in the play, is where Prospero has finally got all his enemies in one place. He's terrified them with images of harpies, which have revealed all their sins, and he has to decide what he's going to do. Now, I always feel with this moment in the play, it's not clear where Prospero is going to go. He could go for forgiveness, or he could go for killing his enemies. He could punish them. We've seen him be cruel. We've also seen him want to bring Ferdinand and Miranda together, who will heal the rifts between the kingdoms. And having captured his enemies, he has a single scene with Ariel, and Ariel communicates with him. And this, to me, is the turning point in the play. Off you go.
Now does my project gather to a head. My charms crack not, my spirits obey, and time goes upright with his carriage. How's the day?
On the 6th hour, at which time, my lord, you said our work should cease.
I did say so, when I first raised the Tempest. Say, my spirit, how fares the king and his followers?
Confined together, in the same fashion as you gave in charge, just as you left them, all prisoners, sir, in the lying grove which weather fens your cell. They cannot budge till your release. The king, his brothers, and yours abide all three distracted, and the remainder mourning over them, brimful of sorrow and dismay. But chiefly him that you termed, sir, the good old Lord Gonzalo. His tears run down his beard, like winter's drops from eaves of reeds. Your charms so strongly worksome, that if you now beheld them, your affections would become tender.
Dost think so, spirit?
Mine would, sir, were I human.
and mine shall. Hast thou, which art but e'er a touch, a feeling of their afflictions, and shall not myself, one of their kind that relish all as sharply passion as they, be kindlier moved than thou art? Though with their high wrongs I am struck to the quick, yet with my nobler reason, 'gainst my fury do I take part. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. They being penitent, the sole drift of my purpose doth extend not a frown further. Go release them, Ariel. My charms I'll break, their senses I'll restore, and they shall be themselves.
I'll fetch them, sir.
Beautiful, thank you. You can see the difference between the way he speaks to Ariel and the way that he speaks to Caliban. And you can also see that, again, this is an incredibly short play, that he condenses into it this massive struggle within Prospero to try and deal with his own darkness and his enemies. The beauty of the play is because it's written in real time, you can feel time ticking away. And Prospero knows what you'll hear at the end of that little speech is he talks about the fact that he's going to let go of his power. He's going to let go of the spells that are controlling them. And he knows that if he's going to deal truly with some attempt to try and heal this rift, he has to do it not as a magician, but as a man. So he has to let go of the powers that make him special. And after Ariel goes off, Prospero gives this speech where he relinquishes his power.
Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves, and ye that on the sands with printless foot do chase the ebbing Neptune and do fly him when he comes back. You demi-puppets that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, whereof the yew not bites, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms, that rejoice to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vaults set roaring war. To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. The strong-based promontory have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, oped, and let them forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure. And when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you. So as my tutor told me the other day, that speech is lifted from Ovid. The images are from Metamorphosis, from this great poetry. All these images of transformation and change, which are steeped in all this. So that moment, you can hear Shakespeare almost saying, I've spent my entire life creating these magical worlds. Now I'm letting it go. And Prospero steps away at this point and confronts the people that were his enemies. And there's this wonderful scene where he tries to reconcile himself to them. Now, to them, it's another death and resurrection. They all thought he was dead, and he reappears 16 years later. But he does so. He's very clear to them that he's doing it to them as a man. And it's an incredibly vulnerable last act. And what he's doing with these, and with all these plays, he's got these wonderful reconciliations. He's taking those comedic endings, but he's doing something much more magical with them. So he does reconcile himself with his enemies. He forgives his brother, but his brother famously doesn't say anything. And even his forgiveness is a little bit qualified. I do forgive thee, unnatural though thou art. And we don't know whether Antonio has been changed, but we do know that Prospero is trying. Now, the two most beautiful moments at the end of the scene is actually the final moments between Prospero and Caliban. Caliban is eventually brought on, having been punished, and Prospero has to accept him. And this is the speech that he gives to Caliban when he appears.
This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine.
It's a very, very simple line. But at that moment, he accepts Caliban, having rejected Caliban, who had, right at the beginning, was like a surrogate son. He accepts Caliban and embraces him. It's not a particularly loving line. He still thinks he's a thing of darkness, but he accepts that it's his, and he has a responsibility to him. Not long after, they have another exchange, and I want you to listen particularly to what Caliban says. Prospero?
Go, sirrah, to my cell. Take with it your companions. As you look to have my pardon, trim it handsomely.
Sorry, Jake, my computer's just froze.
Oh, great. The gremlins are really doing their thing. He says,
sorry.
Okay, so it's a shame because it's the most beautiful line. Prospero says, Caliban says, I shall be wise hereafter and seek for grace.
All right.
You got it?
Yeah, it's unstuck. So can I go again? Sorry.
Give the line, Faz.
Will I give you the cue again?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Go, sirrah, to my son. Go, sirrah, to my cell. Take with you your companions. As you look to have my pardon, trim it handsomely.
Aye, that I will. And I'll be wiser hereafter and seek for grace. What thrice doubled ass was I to take this drunkard for a god and worship this dull fool?
Give us the first line of that, please, again, Faz. Just the line about I shall be wise hereafter.
And I'll be wise hereafter and seek for grace.
Thank you. Now, the key word there is grace. The word grace has such resonant meaning. It's a word that doesn't mean the same thing to us anymore, but it means spiritual grace. It's a gift from God. For Caliban to seek for grace, even though it's for Shakespeare to put that word in Caliban's mouth, means that there is something profoundly redeemable in Caliban. And the beauty at the end of the play is that Prospero allows Caliban his freedom. He gives him, as he leaves the island, Caliban is allowed on the island and is able to return back to the state he was in, the primordial state he was in of the oneness with nature. So there is, at the end of the play, Shakespeare's attempt to deal with the dark side of himself, the things that he's rejected. And if you think about all the plays with all the male heroes in crisis, all of them dealing with rage and fury and sexual jealousy, all the journeys of Macbeth and Hamlet and Iago, Claudio, all of them, he tries to deal with it in this last play, and he basically says, I have to accept this is me, and I have to give it its freedom. And then a page later, he has to say goodbye to Ariel. And it's one of the most beautiful moments where he finally gives Ariel his freedom, and Prospero lets go of everything that he's once held on and goes to return to the real world, where he talks about being every third thought should be my grave. Now, we know that after Shakespeare wrote The Tempest, he retired from the theatre. We know he went back to Stratford and spent the last years of his life out there, didn't write anything, not that survived. That is, of course, unless Francis Bacon or several of the people who died before he died wrote his plays. So in some sense, that's what he did. Towards the end of his life, he decided he wanted to quit London, quit the theatre, and go back to where he was born and just be a man. So yes, so it's the most beautiful ending. And what's astonishing about that play is its formal beauty. It's almost perfect the way it's constructed. And as I say, I know it's been a long old session with this one. We've gone from Pericles, which he adopted, took over and tried to perfect, to the splurge that was Cymbeline, to the more focused Winter's Tale, which still had a kind of schism in the middle, to this exquisitely beautiful play, which is as good as anything else that he wrote in his life. And in all of these plays, you have all these wonderful images of magic and rebirth and death and coming back to life, and where you see all the images that he's used all his life put back into his plays and remolded in some sense, trying to make sense of all the different things that he wrote about. And as I say, talk about it generationally. So the hope for Prospero is that Miranda and Ferdinand will be married and take the two kingdoms into the future. And instead of being like Lear, he's going to have less power and control. Caliban is freed, Ariel is freed, and in some sense these two sides of him are released. So it's a long journey. It's a wonderful play to end an extraordinary career. But as I say, that it is the pinnacle of what he did and the perfection of his craft. So he ended the play with his final epilogue, and this is many ways seen as his farewell to the theatre, very personal. And it may well have been that Shakespeare himself played Prospero, because it was often the case, my father always used to say that Shakespeare often played the characters whose motivations were hidden or were subtly hidden, because he knew what they were. It's the same when you read Molière's plays, the characters that he always played, you just knew that he left out the psychology. So he didn't give clues to other actors as to what was going on. The challenge for The Tempest is it's so condensed, it's so pure, and sometimes as a director you have to really try and work out what's motivating them. And it takes years to really work out what is really pushing Prospero and how you make the whole thing dramatic. And also, but you can't do it unless you believe in the magic of it. So you can't do The Winter's Tale unless you believe in the magic of a statue coming to life. You can't do Cymbeline unless you understand this overarching vision. There is something above these plays, even when they're flawed and broken, that make them spellbinding on stage. And that is Shakespeare's genius, really. So Robin will finish with that last speech.
Now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have's mine own, which is most faint. Now, 'tis true, I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell, but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free.
Very good. So yeah, it's a beautiful final speech. You can hear all of that. You from, what is it? Sins from pardon be, a couple of crimes of pardon be. That's him untying the knot of his whole life and letting it go. So that brings us to the end of this journey with these plays. I would like to say a massive thank you to all my actors. I always usually forget someone, and I'm not going to. Thank you. Kayleigh, to Danny, to Hannah, to Dan, to Nigel, to Karren, to Elaine, and to Faz. And have I missed anybody? Not this time. Great. You've been really wonderful. I want to say massive thanks. I hope. Who did I miss? No, I said Faz. Oh, Edmund, I'm so sorry. I always miss someone. I'm so sorry. After 2.5 hours of talking, it's quite exhausting. I apologise. You read beautifully as well. So I hope these plays, it's a harder one to do, this one, because the plays are not so well known. So there isn't a short, so a lot of what I was saying was exposition and explaining to you what the stories were. But that's fairly essential, because without that, you don't understand what the challenge of the plays were and what their achievement is. But I hope if you haven't read these plays, it inspires you to go and have a read. And this is our third Shakespeare workshop, and it's the end of our Shakespeare phase. We were originally just going to do one, and we ended up doing 3. So we're hoping to move on next week to Ibsen, if everybody wants to crack on with some really powerful stuff. But I want to say a massive thank you to everybody, and hopefully see you next week.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well done, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Dan. Take it easy. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.